The roar of the crowd at the Olympia delle Tofane was a deafening wall of sound, but inside Mikaela Shiffrin's helmet, there was only the jagged, rhythmic pull of her own breath. Below her lay a ribbon of blue ice, so steep it looked less like a race course and more like a frozen vertical drop into the abyss. It was February 2026, and the world was watching a ghost return to the scene of the crime. 2 years earlier, this very mountain in Cortina d'Ampezzo had tried to break her. We all remembered the footage, the high-speed wobble, the sickening impact into the safety netting, and that haunting, hollow silence as the rescue helicopter descended. While the doctors in 2024 focused on her torn ligaments and bone bruises, they were missing the most dangerous injury of all. Deep inside her brain, a tiny almond-shaped structure called the amygdala had essentially taken a high-definition snapshot of that crash and filed it under mortal danger. When Mikaela stood at that start gate for her final Olympic run, she wasn't just competing against the greatest skiers on Earth. She was locked in a biological cage match with her own nervous system. I am Sebastian, and as a performance analyst, I believe that to truly understand how she found the courage to win that gold, we have to look past the spandex and the skis and look directly into the chemistry of fear. This is the story of how Mikaela Shiffrin deconstructed her own PTSD to perform a medical miracle on ice. To understand why this gold medal felt different, we have to look at the woman behind the robot mask. Long before she was a global icon, Mikaela was a young girl in Vail, Colorado, with a sticker on her helmet that read, ABFTD, always be faster than the boys. She was raised in a household where skiing was treated like a beautiful, complex science project. Her father, Jeff Shiffrin, was her rock, her coach, and the man who taught her that process was more important than any trophy. He ended every conversation with a simple code: be nice, work hard, I love you. But in 2020, that foundation was shattered when Jeff passed away in a sudden accident. This was the moment the cracks began to form. Mikaela has been incredibly open about how that loss triggered the beginning of her struggle with post-traumatic stress disorder. For years, she battled flashbacks and an anxiety so thick it felt like physical weight. So, when she flew off that mountain in Cortina in 2024, it wasn't just a skiing accident, it was a multi-car pileup of trauma. Her brain didn't just see a crash, it saw another instance of her world falling apart. By the time the 2026 Olympics arrived, her nervous system had built a fortress of fear around that specific Italian mountain. The biological reality of PTSD in an elite athlete is like having a corrupted file in your computer's operating system. Think of your amygdala as a hypersensitive smoke detector. After the 2024 crash, Mikaela's smoke detector was no longer waiting for a fire. It was going off every time she smelled a toaster. This is what neuroscientists call environmental anchoring. Because she got hurt in Cortina, her brain linked the jagged peaks of the Dolomites and the smell of the cold alpine air to the sensation of dying. Every time she looked at the course, her hypothalamus, the brain's emergency dispatcher, signaled her adrenal glands to flood her system with a spicy chemical cocktail of cortisol and adrenaline. While a little adrenaline can sharpen your focus, an oversaturation makes your muscles twitchy and rigid. In a sport where you are balancing on a metal edge thinner than a credit card at 80 miles per hour, rigidity is a death sentence. Her body was literally trying to sabotage her performance to keep her alive. She described feeling heavy, as if her legs belonged to someone else. This wasn't a lack of will, it was a physiological lockdown. One of the most fascinating things about Mikaela is her superpower, her ability to nap anywhere, even in the middle of a high-stress race day. In the past, this was a sign of her incredible ability to regulate her nervous system. But during her battle with PTSD, that superpower turned into a symptom of dissociation. When the brain is overwhelmed by trauma, it sometimes tries to unplug from reality to protect itself. She found herself feeling detached, as if she were watching her own races on a television screen rather than living them. This created a massive problem for her internal GPS, or what we call proprioception.
Your joints are filled with sensors that tell your brain where your limbs are in space. When you are in a state of trauma-induced dissociation, that data becomes noisy and unreliable. To win in 2026, Mikaela had to do more than just practice her turns. She had to perform a total system restore on her brain's ability to feel the ground.
The road to that Olympic podium was paved with a clinical technique called graduated exposure therapy. It is the same process we use for people terrified of spiders or heights. You don't start by jumping into a pit of tarantulas. You start by looking at a photo of a spider. For Mikaela, this meant returning to the Olympia delle Tofane during the off-season. She had to stand on the delta turn, the exact spot where she had been airlifted out 2 years prior, and simply breathe. She had to teach her amygdala a new piece of evidence. I am here, the sun is shining, and I am not dying. This is called extinction learning. It isn't about deleting the memory of the crash. It's about building a brand new, high-speed neural highway that bypasses the fear center. She had to repeat this thousands of times, slowly increasing the speed, slowly adding the gates, until the new data was louder than the old trauma. It was an exhausting, invisible grind that required more bravery than any downhill run ever could.
To monitor this neurological rebuilding, her team used a metric called heart rate variability, or HRV. Most people think a steady robotic heartbeat is a sign of health, but it's actually the opposite. A heart that is ready for battle is more like a world-class jazz drummer. It has subtle fluid variations in the timing between every single beat. This variation is controlled by the vagus nerve, the volume knob for your body's stress response. When Mikaela's PTSD was at its peak, her heartbeat was likely a rigid, panicked metronome. By using biofeedback and deep diaphragmatic breathing, she learned to force her vagus nerve to send a safe signal to her brain. She was essentially hacking her own biology. Before she pushed out of the start gate in 2026, she wasn't just checking her bindings. She was checking her HRV data to ensure her brain was in a state of physiological readiness rather than survival mode.
When she finally dropped into that Olympic run, the world saw something that defied explanation. She wasn't just skiing, she was flowing. Scientists call this transient hypofrontality. It is a state where the logical, worrying part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, completely shuts down. When you are in flow, the amygdala is silenced by the sheer speed of the task. For Mikaela, this was the ultimate victory. The ghosts of 2024 were still there, but they couldn't keep up with her. She was moving so fast and with such precision that her brain didn't have the bandwidth to be afraid. She sliced through the delta turn with a violent, beautiful aggression that proved she had reclaimed the mountain. Her heart rate was likely hitting nearly 200 beats per minute, but her mind was as still as a frozen lake. She wasn't a robot anymore. She was a human being who had mastered the art of being comfortably uncomfortable.
Looking back at that gold medal moment, we see a legacy that goes far beyond skiing. For decades, we expected our champions to be unbreakable, as if having emotions was a design flaw. Mikaela Shiffrin shattered that myth. By being honest about her PTSD, her grief for her father, and her paralyzing fear, she became a pioneer for a new kind of athletic science. She proved that the brain is plastic, that it can be hurt, but it can also be rewired. Her victory in Cortina was a Bannister moment. Much like when Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile in 1954 and proved the human heart wouldn't explode, Mikaela proved that you can return to the exact place that traumatized you and find a way to thrive. She showed us that trauma is not a life sentence. It is a piece of data that can be updated with enough patience and science. When she crossed that finish line and saw her name at the top of the leaderboard, she didn't scream or celebrate wildly. She leaned over her poles and took a single, deep, shaky breath. To the fans in the stands, it looked like exhaustion. To a performance analyst, that breath was the sound of a vagus nerve finally declaring peace. The gold medal she took home from 2026 is a beautiful object, But the real masterpiece is the network of neurons she rebuilt in the dark when no one was watching. Mikaela Shiffrin didn't win because she was fearless. She won because she was the most scientifically brave person on the mountain. She taught us all that when your biological smoke detector starts screaming, you don't have to run out of the building. You just have to stay in the room long enough to show your brain that there is no fire. One turn, one heartbeat, and one breath at a time. I am Sebastian, and this has been the Injury Breakdown. If Mikaela's journey from the helicopter to the podium gave you a new framework for your own comebacks, share this with someone who is currently facing their own mountain. I will see you in the next case file.